Please subscribe to help you and your motorcycle perform better.
I want to be a rider, I want to have a motorcycle, I want to get into this sport. Welcome. First and most important part is you're seeking information and gathering that to make some intelligent decisions. And by far, if you detach, consider your options, and then make a choice, you'll stay as a motorcyclist your entire life. So the important thing about this series is I am going to share with you everything I've learned since 1974. And I'm going to put it into very concise terms and give you essentially a bullet point list using the whiteboard. There are hundreds of organizations that are there to help you join our sports. So before you go get instruction, before you sign up for classes, before you do everything else, there are some stages I would like you to go through first. If you want to join the sport, keep watching. Why do I need a whiteboard? Well, we got to go through some out loud thinking, shall we say, about you want to become a rider, you want to join this sport, so what do we got to look at? So the first thing by far that everybody asks me is, if you've never ridden a motorcycle, there's a couple choices. We're going to go with a dirt bike, or we're going to go with a street bike. Depending what your budget is, these are cheap. The equipment you buy to get kitted out for a dirt bike, relatively speaking, is cheap. So if you start on this end, you're going to have a lot less expenditure. Also, the greatest thing about a dirt bike is speed. The speed's significantly less when you're starting to learn. Generally, when people ask me, what bike should I get? I'm going to do this right out of the gate. You are not getting a street bike right out of the gate. You can work a dirt bike and have a tremendous learning curve up to 20 miles an hour. You will fall off frequently at 20 miles an hour with all the correct equipment. Yeah, you're going to get bruises, you're going to get bumps. Get over it. You'll also laugh and your face will probably hurt more than your body. Next decision tree moment is, what engine? Have you ever ridden anything motorized whatsoever? And if the answer is no, then we're going to go with somewhere between an 80 and a 150. But the caveat here is, what is your height and what is your inseam? Because if you're 5 foot, your inseam's short, a 150 might work. If you are 6'5", a 150 is not going to work. You may need a full size 125 big wheel instead. So depending on this data point, you're going to have to go basically sit on bikes. Now if you sit on it and your knees are up by your ears, that's not going to work, is it? Yes, we do that. We do it on pocket bikes, we do it on all kinds of stupid things, but we've done that because we've got a lot of history. So how do you fit on that bike? Are you comfortable? Now, oftentimes when we go through this process, guess what? We're out with friends who are loaning us a bike. If they're loaning us a bike, you've still got to fit on it. You can't be sitting on a PW50. Even if you're going to ride somebody else's bike, you still have to fit it to make sure that what you're going to learn is constructive, not painful. If we're doing the dirt bike thing, what is that going to benefit you? Well, if we've reached this point of what bike, and we know what we're getting, what's step one? We got to learn clutch and RPM. Yes, you can buy automatic motorcycles, but they're extremely rare. So let's keep on point here. There's a couple ways to do this. You can preset the idle. So the engine idle, instead of being 800 to 1100 RPM, is 2000 to 2500 RPM. That will allow the clutch and the bite point to be found to allow that to come out. And what is for all of us when we first learn, stalling a motorcycle is extremely frustrating. So if you push the RPMs up, oftentimes you'll find that stalling is eliminated. So at that point, the person learning, You're not teaching them to turn the throttle, or you are not turning the throttle. You're simply finding the bite point and rolling the clutch out. So that's the first part here, but then number two, it's going to be obviously brakes. Now, when you're learning with that, the only brake we're going to use is the front, because we're learning with our hands. I know all the people in dirt world are going to start screaming and yelling of rear brake first, rear brake first. But at 5 to 10 miles an hour, it's highly unlikely that you will lock the front instantly because you're pulling the clutch in and learning the brake. What we're trying to leverage from your past, and most people have ridden a bicycle, is pull the clutch and pull the brake. So there's a familiarity in terms of that mental zone. There's history there and we can leverage it. So if we're doing idle and bite point, what's our speed going to be? Somewhere in the region of 5 to 10 mph. That's our goal, because all we're trying to do is get the clutch out and let the person roll with it, pull the clutch in, pull the front brake, come to a stop, do it again. If you have a concern, one of the things you can do where accidents don't happen, you can take the shifter off. So they can just sit there, not bang the shifter by accident and have a problem. Anything wrong with doing that? Their whole focus is raised RPM, find the bite point, let it roll, clutch in, stop, do it again, do it again. Every one of us that rode a manual or a stick car and learned in that, learned clutch control first. Not shifting, not speed, not anything else. So that learning curve becomes very simple. If we're doing this and we're doing stop, start, what's the incidence of falling off? It's minimal. So again, it's positive reinforcement in a situation where the person can learn quickly, and not only learn quickly, but smile. That may take all of about 10 minutes for somebody that's really good and natural. It may take a little longer for somebody that isn't as coordinated with hand-eye coordination, because we're not using our feet at this point, we're keeping it simple. Once you're 100% competent at starting and stopping, then the next thing we can do is move on to shifting. There is no rush to learn this skill set. I based that on something a buddy of mine I was teaching decided after about 5 minutes he could shift. And at that point, the speed he got from first to second made him freeze, and he rode into the side of the house. So you will learn first to second only. It's the longest throw, it's the biggest foot movement. It's the very first experience, so if you can master this, any gear after second is much easier because the shifter movement's vastly reduced. So if we go first to second, then we're going to shift up. What does that mean? Well, we go from 5 to 10 mph, we're going to go somewhere to 10 to 20 mph. Is the person, or are you, comfortable with double the speed? Now, we as experienced riders are kind of giggling a little bit, but when you're brand new, it's just like getting on a bicycle. The first time you pedal off, well, now you have to stop, but the speed causes you to contract or tense up or react in a very negative way. So it is essential that all of this is done in a straight line. By far the most success I've had with everybody I've taught is if we're going through this process and we're learning shifting, you put it in second gear and you continue on your way. Then you bring it to a stop. You turn the bike around. You put it back in first gear and you start over. You put it in second gear and you continue on your way. Then you bring it to a stop. You go back to first, start over. Under no circumstances at this point in the proceedings should you learn downshifting. I just want to teach the ability to shift up. Far less stressful, and I can only say that from historical perspective and the problems that it's caused in the past. So, once we learn first to second, get this mastered, then we can then move on. Well, the next thing to do again, straight line. So now space is an issue. Do we have enough space? Do we have enough room? So now we're going to go first, second, third, which will take us to somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 mph. And for me, this is all you get. That's as fast as we're going to go, and you're going to practice and practice and practice the upshifting. When you've got the upshifting done, you're still going to stop, turn around, go back to first, and start over. Once you've mastered this, getting your eye confident with speed, getting yourself coordinated with pulling the clutch in, getting next gear, letting the clutch out, because we are still at 2,000 to 2,500 RPM. We're still not teaching the throttle, we're letting the bike move along. So at that point, there's very little reason to use the throttle, which keeps things extremely safe. Now, depending on the bike, that RPM may not be quite high enough. I don't know, you'll have to figure it out. You'll also have to figure it out with the rider. But at this point, based on all of that, it's positive, positive, positive. Once they've got the hang of this, then we can look at a downshift. And that downshift is going to be from third to second, which makes a lot more sense because it's a short throw. There's less gear difference in the ratio in the transmission, so it's less likely to lock the rear wheel. You're going a little bit quicker, so the transmission is moving faster. So then, if they understand clutch in, downshift to second, clutch out, then you can spend at least 10 minutes doing this. So this will be, for me, stage one. That's enough. That will be it for the day. Yes, they want more, but realistically, at this point, being completely fluent and getting the bike going, first, second, third, downshifting to second, back to third, all the while not using the throttle because the RPM allow the bike to lug on, because the throttle needs to be a separate time or a separate day, because that's when the danger level or the risk level comes up. So stage one is all of this. So the next thing we've got to learn is throttle. So if you're on a road bike, it's big, it's heavy, you're on pavement, getting this wrong can hurt. If you're in the dirt, where I'm suggesting you start, it's not going to be as bad because we're going so much slower and a dirt bike weighs next to nothing. The maximum speed we'll get up to is somewhere around 15 miles an hour because we've got to teach how to use it and wind it out and then set it back. Again, idle is going to be set at 2,000 to 2,500 RPM because we're going back to the comfort zone that the rider has already experienced a great deal of success in. So that's awesome. So at this point, now we have an issue with gearing and speed, because getting on the gas in first on a dirt bike, it's a very short window, it's extremely jerky. What we're going to use is second gear. So second gear will usually top out somewhere around 20 mph. Maybe it might be 15. So again, we're in a relatively safe zone. Our decision tree is, first of all, positive reinforcement, relearn the clutch, right? Get back to that zone, get back to that smile, get back to that positive environment. Do the same, add throttle. Well, how much? So you're going to let the rider experience that, but what we're going to do is give them a maximum distance. So there's a boundary set, so your eye looks at the boundary, locks the boundary in, and so when you roll on, you will roll off because you don't want to get to that boundary. So in this instance, adding the throttle on, the person can slowly add it on because they're going to be cautious. Roll the throttle on, drive the bike forward, and then they'll roll out of the throttle. So one of the things we're trying to teach here, which is really important, is control via smooth application. Some of us will be too frightened and be on off, and the bike will jerk. Some will get that right away and be pinned on the rev limiter and waiting for the person all the way down there. So at that point, rather than let them get the next gear, bring the boundary in, shut down the zone where they're working it. So we have to learn control and smooth application with throttle on and throttle off. The worst thing we can do is chop it, right? For me, for stage 2, is you're learning the speed and acceleration, you're learning it in a fixed gear, you have the idle up so you're unlikely to stall because you let the RPMs drop and the bike stalls. So there's several positives there. Our speed's relatively low, you're setting a boundary of somebody or somebody preferably with some extra space behind them, and then at that point you building on positive after positive after positive. I don't care how much time you spend with this. Personally, leveraging second gear is fast enough, but everybody's different. So some people may need an hour, some people may need 5 minutes and get it. This is where if we can get this particular stage right, everything that person does from that point on, their skill on that motorcycle will evolve. So if we can embed this right from the very beginning, the motorcycling career the person will be always based on positives, and their learning curve will always involve positive reinforcement in order to get to the end of stage 2.
Dave Moss can tune your suspension no matter where you are on the planet via his remote tuning service. Contact Dave on Facebook or by email, dave@davemosstuning.com.